"Get lost! Just get out of here!" screamed my granddaughter when I went to visit her. Behind me, my son held me back, and my daughter-in-law was calling the asylum. They had me committed to steal my inheritance. But I got out. I blocked everything. I sold the company, and I vanished. Today I have another life. The deepest pain does not come from strangers. It comes from those to whom we have given everything. Those cruel words coming from the mouth of Valerie, my granddaughter of just 9 years old, stuck in my chest like shards of ice. It was not so much what she said, that slang she picked up to kick someone out, but the cold and rehearsed look with which she did it. Her eyes, identical to those of my late wife Martha, now conveyed a contempt I had never seen in her before. "What are you doing, Dad?" "We told you not to come without calling first," said Mark. "My only son," while he held me firmly by the arm with unnecessary force. "You are upsetting Valerie again." I felt the grip of his fingers sinking into my flesh while I watched Christine, my daughter-in-law, speaking hurriedly on the phone in the kitchen. I managed to hear alarming fragments. "Disoriented again. Erratic behavior. We need immediate intervention." In that instant I understood everything with devastating clarity. It was not a failed visit. It was an ambush. My own family had led me into a trap. I only came to bring her the book she asked for. I managed to articulate, pointing to the package wrapped in gift paper that I had dropped when Mark grabbed me. "We spoke yesterday on the phone, and she told me she wanted to read The Little Prince." "Dad, Valerie did not speak with you yesterday," Mark replied with a condescending voice, like someone talking to a confused child. "You are fabricating conversations again, Doctor." Goodman warned us about these episodes. I looked at Valerie seeking confirmation, some wink or sign of complicity that would reveal the lie, but she simply backed away, moving closer to Christine, who had already finished her call, and now watched me with a mixture of fake concern and barely disguised satisfaction. "They will arrive in 10 minutes, Christine announced, like someone talking about a food delivery service and not about those who would come to commit me against my will. "This is a mistake," I said, trying to keep calm while I evaluated my options. The doors blocked by my son. The windows too high. The neighbors too distant to hear any call for help. "I am perfectly lucid, and I can prove it." "Of course you are, Dad," Mark replied with that condescendence he had perfected in recent months. "Just like when you accused Christine of stealing company documents. Or when you insisted that we were poisoning your food." "I found the missing files on her desk," I replied firmly, "and the lab tests confirmed traces of sedatives in my coffee." "Do you see?" said Christine, addressing Mark as if I were not present. "He continues with the same paranoid ideas." Just as Dr. Goodman said, the sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted the exchange. Through the window I saw a discreet ambulance, without lights or sirens, parking in front of the house. The time to act was running out quickly. "Let me at least say goodbye properly to Valerie," I requested, adopting a defeated tone that seemed to reassure Mark. "If I really need medical help, I do not want my last memory with her to be this moment." Something in my voice, perhaps the authentic pain that I did not need to fake, seemed to resonate with Mark. He loosened his grip slightly. "5 minutes," he conceded, "but we are staying right here." I knelt in front of Valerie, ignoring the pain in my 61-year-old knees. Her eyes avoided mine, a behavior so unbecoming of the curious and affectionate girl I had partially raised after Martha died. "The book is in the package, Valerie," I said softly, "along with the letter you asked me to keep in my safe, the one you wrote to read in case of emergency. I think this qualifies as one." Her gaze met mine briefly, a flash of recognition that disappeared so fast I almost doubted I had seen it. But it was enough. My little accomplice was still there, somewhere under the layers of manipulation to which she had been subjected. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of those coming to take me. "Time is up," Christine sentenced, advancing toward the door. As I stood up slowly, I discreetly slid my hand into the inside pocket of my jacket where I kept my phone. With movements calculated during years of tense negotiations, I activated the audio recording without taking it out. If my suspicions were correct, what I was about to witness would confirm everything I had been documenting for months. What happened in the next 20 minutes was a masterpiece of manipulation. I saw how Mark and Christine played the role of concerned relatives before the paramedics and the on-call psychiatrist. I heard how they described symptoms I had never manifested, episodes that had never occurred, behaviors that completely contradicted my medical history of decades. He has been accusing us of conspiring to keep his company, Mark explained with perfectly rehearsed concern. He shows up without warning in the middle of the night, scaring our daughter. We think he could harm himself, I observed in silence, evaluating every participant in this farce. The paramedics, professional but distant, clearly used to complicated family situations. The psychiatrist, the supposed Dr. Nelson, who curiously never directed direct questions to me about my mental state, preferring to accept my son's account without question. It is for the best for everyone, Mr. Miller, the doctor finally told me, while the paramedics prepared a stretcher. A 72-hour evaluation in a controlled environment, for your safety. I could have screamed. I could have fought. I could have created a scene that would only confirm the narrative they had built so carefully. Instead, I did what 4 decades as a businessman had taught me. Adapt strategically, observe patiently, and plan my next move when no one expected it. I understand, I said with resigned calm. Can I at least take some personal belongings? The relief on the faces of Mark and Christine was instant. The battle they expected did not materialize, making them momentarily lower their guard. Of course, Mr. Miller, replied one of the paramedics. Basic items only. Your family can bring the rest later. While Christine accompanied me to the bedroom to collect some clothes, I noticed Valerie watching me from the hallway, the package with the book now in her hands. A visible conflict in her expression. Our gazes met briefly, and I could see a flash of the girl she really was, momentarily released from her parents' control. I discreetly slipped a paper into my wallet before handing it to Mark, who insisted on keeping it for safety. On the paper was written the code to my personal safety deposit box, the one that neither Mark nor Christine knew about, where I kept the documents that would eventually expose this family conspiracy. As I voluntarily got into the ambulance, I kept my expression neutral. I would let them believe they had won. For now, they did not know that this apparent end was only the beginning of my counterattack. A counterattack that I had begun to plan from the first time I detected missing corporate documents. From the first time I noticed sedatives in my coffee. From the first moment, I understood that my own son had decided I was worth more committed than present in the company I built from scratch. My name is Richard Miller. I was born in 1960, in a working-class neighborhood of Chicago, son of an accountant and an elementary school teacher. My parents, without being wealthy, sacrificed personal comforts to provide me with quality education and unwavering values. Money comes and goes, my father used to say, but integrity once lost is never recovered. At 24, recently graduated in industrial engineering, I got a modest loan and founded Miller Industrial Plastics in a small rented space in the industrial district. The first years were brutally difficult. I worked 18 hours a day, reinvested every dollar earned, and gradually diversified into specialized niches that big manufacturers ignored. It was during that time of ceaseless work when I met Martha, daughter of a raw materials supplier, intelligent, determined, and with a sense of humor that lit up even the hardest days. Martha became first my informal financial advisor, then my business partner, and finally my wife. You have a vision for business, Richard, she told me one afternoon while we reviewed financial projections in my makeshift office. But you need structure to transform that vision into a sustainable empire. Together we expanded Miller Industrial Plastics from a modest workshop to a company with 3 manufacturing plants, specializing in high-precision industrial components for automotive and medical sectors. While I focused on technical innovation and commercial relations, Martha developed administrative and financial systems that provided a solid foundation for our accelerated but controlled growth. Mark, our only son, was born in 1985 when the company had already reached significant stability. From his childhood, we tried to instill in him both traditional family values and an understanding of the effort required to build something valuable from scratch. We do not want him to be a privileged child who takes everything for granted, Martha insisted, while we established clear rules about allowances linked to concrete responsibilities. even when our financial situation allowed us to provide him with practically any luxury. As Mark grew, he showed clear intelligence but also a certain tendency toward the easy path that concerned us occasionally. Where Martha and I had faced obstacles with unwavering determination, Mark seemed to constantly look for shortcuts, solutions that required minimal personal effort. It is just a phase, Martha reasoned when I expressed my concerns. He needs to find his own motivation, something he is truly passionate about. By the time Mark turned 18, Miller Industrial Plastics BAD transformed into Miller Industrial Group, with 5 manufacturing plants, 2 distribution centers, and presence in international markets. Our small initial office was now a 10-story corporate building downtown, and our modest family apartment had become a residence in the Heights. Mark studied business administration at a prestigious private university, where his performance was consistently average. He did not particularly stand out, but he did not fail either. He maintained precisely the minimum level required to advance without complications. Maybe business is not his true calling, Martha suggested one night after reviewing mediocre semester grades. We should support him in exploring other interests. But Mark insisted that his future was in Miller Industrial Group. It is our family legacy. He argued with conviction that seemed genuine. I just need practical experience, not just academic theory. Following that logic, we integrated him gradually into the company during vacations and eventually in a formal position after his graduation. He started from basic positions, rotating through different departments to understand complete operations, exactly as I had done decades ago. It was during this period when he met Christine, an accountant recently hired in the financial department, professionally competent and personally charismatic. Christine ascended quickly in the corporate structure thanks to notable analytical skills and impeccable work ethic. Her relationship with Mark progressed rapidly from co-workers to romantic partners. Martha, always perceptive about human motivations, expressed discreet reservations that I initially dismissed as natural maternal concern. There is something calculated in her interest for Mark, she commented after a family dinner, where Christine had been particularly attentive with us. Observe how her questions always drift toward financial or structural aspects of the company, never toward Mark as a person. She is an accountant, honey, I replied, downplaying her concerns. Naturally, she is interested in those professional topics. The wedding, celebrated with substantial elegance but not ostentatious, occurred approximately a year later. By then, Martha was already showing initial symptoms of the illness that would eventually take her from us, although her formal diagnosis would arrive months later. The first years of marriage seemed relatively harmonious. Mark and Christine bought a house in an exclusive gated community, close to our residence. Christine continued ascending professionally within the company, eventually reaching the position of Deputy Financial Director, reporting directly to our veteran CFO. When Valerie was born in 2010, the joy seemed complete. Martha, already facing intensive medical treatments, found renewed energy in her role as a grandmother. She spent hours with the little one whenever her health allowed it, reading her stories, teaching her songs, silently transmitting values she hoped would endure beyond her physical presence. Promise me you will always be close to Valerie, Martha asked me during a particularly lucid afternoon toward the end of her illness. She will need an anchor of stability and authentic values, especially if my suspicions about Christine prove founded. What suspicions exactly? I asked, alarmed by such a direct insinuation. Unusual in Martha, who typically expressed concerns with greater subtlety. I have observed patterns in recent financial reports, she replied, briefly activating her characteristic analytical sharpness. Small but systematic inconsistencies in conversations interrupted abruptly when I enter unexpectedly. Christine is implementing something, and I do not believe it is for the benefit of the company or family. I promise to stay vigilant, although internally I partially attributed her concerns to side effects of intensive medication, an error I would regret deeply in later years. Martha passed away peacefully one Tuesday in April of 2013, surrounded by those she loved most. Her departure left a void impossible to describe adequately. We had been partners in absolutely everything for more than 3 decades. family, company, community projects, shared dreams. During subsequent months, I functioned almost automatically, maintaining established routines more by inertia than conscious purpose. The company continued operating efficiently thanks to solid structures we had implemented over years. Mark assumed additional responsibilities during this period, showing unexpected organizational capacity that provided me brief hope about his future executive potential. Valerie, barely a girl of 3 years old, became an unexpected emotional anchor. Our frequent meetings, afternoons in the park, reading sessions, visits to children's museums, provided structure and purpose when everything else seemed temporarily empty of meaning. It was approximately a year after Martha's passing when I began to notice subtle but worrying changes in family and business dynamics. First, Mark began to question strategic decisions established long before, presenting proposals for aggressive expansion that contradicted the philosophy of controlled growth that Martha and I had implemented consistently. "The current market requires bold movements, Dad," he argued during board meetings, with Christine nodding emphatically at his side. "Our traditional caution is costing us significant opportunities." Simultaneously, my visits with Valerie began to face increasingly frequent logistical complications. Established plans were canceled for unexpected commitments. Agreed schedules were modified unilaterally. And gradually my access to my granddaughter was systematically reduced. "Valerie is at a crucial formative age," Christine explained with a professional tone that reminded me of corporate presentations. "We need consistent structure and predictable routines for her optimal development," apparently reasonable on the surface. This justification served conveniently to limit my interactions with the only person who potentially could notice changes in my behavior or physical condition if something unexpected occurred. 2 years after Martha's passing, Christine presented a formal proposal for complete financial restructuring of Miller Industrial Group. The plan, technically sophisticated and presented impeccably, effectively centralized financial control in the department she directed, significantly reducing my direct supervision over corporate monetary flows. "It is simply necessary modernization, Mr. Miller," she explained during the presentation to the board of directors. Current structures were designed for a company considerably smaller and less complex than the current operation, subtly implying systems developed by Martha were now obsolete, requiring update by contemporary experts. Something in the condescending tone and underlying implications activated internal alarms I had ignored previously. I remembered Martha's final warnings and began to pay renewed attention to administrative details I had partially delegated during the period of mourning. What I discovered during the subsequent discreet investigation was deeply disturbing. Questionable transfers to recently established subsidiaries, incomplete documentation for significant acquisitions, and more alarming, subtle but systematic modifications in security protocols that controlled access to main corporate accounts. I need an immediate external audit. I informed the board of directors, ignoring the momentarily alarmed expression of Christine. Complete review of financial operations of the last 24 months. The audit revealed exactly what I had begun to suspect. Meticulous preparations for eventual transfer of operational and financial control from original founders toward the new generation, implemented gradually through apparently routine but strategically significant modifications. The resulting confrontation was tense but controlled. Mark and Christine presented technical justifications for every irregularity identified, emphasizing necessary modernization and operational efficiency while carefully avoiding admitting underlying intentions. "If you had concerns, Dad, you should have expressed them directly," Mark replied when I finally questioned real motivations. "These unfounded accusations only generate unnecessary mistrust." I implemented immediate corrective measures, reversal of problematic procedural changes, restoration of original controls, and temporarily intensified direct supervision over financial operations. Mark and Christine accepted these modifications with apparent resignation, which retrospectively I should have recognized as strategic adaptation rather than genuine capitulation. It was approximately then when incidents initially dismissed as unfortunate coincidences began. Important documents inexplicably lost, right before critical meetings, important emails that never reached intended recipients, and occasionally, Episodes of momentary confusion after consuming coffee prepared specifically by Christine, as a thoughtful gesture toward her hard-working father-in-law. Simultaneously, changes in dynamics with Valerie intensified. My granddaughter, previously affectionate and communicative during our meetings, began to show growing reticence, repeating phrases that clearly did not originate in a child's mind. "Grandpa, why are you always so confused?" she asked innocently during a visit supervised by Christine. "Mommy says sometimes you forget important things and you make up stories." Seed of doubt planted strategically, destined eventually to bloom as justification for necessary intervention regarding apparent cognitive deterioration. The situation reached a critical point approximately 6 months ago, when I accidentally discovered documents in Christine's office detailing procedures for declaration of mental incapacity and transfer of corporate control to a protective trust administered conveniently by Mark and herself. Confronted with undeniable evidence, Christine maintained an admirable posture. Simply prudent contingency planning, Mr. Miller. As financial director, I must consider all possible scenarios for business continuity, including potential cognitive deterioration considering your age and recent stress. I am 61 years old and have perfect medical exams, I replied, maintaining a measured tone while internally documenting every word for future reference. Hardly justifies such elaborate preparations for my supposed imminent incapacity. That night I took decisions that would fundamentally change the trajectory of subsequent events. First, I discreetly hired an independent private security firm for exhaustive investigation of recent activities, of Mark and Christine, both personal and professional. Second, I established secure communication channels with key executives absolutely trustworthy within Miller Industrial Group. Finally, I implemented basic personal security protocols, discrete cameras in my residence, regular analysis of food and drinks, and a daily verification system with my personal lawyer. During the following months, I maintained a facade of normality while methodically accumulating evidence and preparing strategic countermeasures. Christine and Mark, perceiving correctly the reduction in opportunities for direct manipulation, apparently accelerated original plans, implementing Phase 2, which I would only subsequently understand completely. The new strategy involved a component previously underestimated. Valerie, my granddaughter, now 9 years old and infinitely vulnerable to parental influence, began to report worrying behaviors during our increasingly limited interactions. According to the carefully built narrative, I appeared unexpectedly at inappropriate times, asked confusing questions, and occasionally showed unacceptable agitation when plans were modified without prior notification. Any protest of mine was simply incorporated as additional evidence of progressive cognitive deterioration and characteristic denial of the condition. One particularly significant afternoon, approximately 3 months ago, Valerie contacted me directly using a tablet I had given her for her birthday. The call, unusually private without visible parental supervision, revealed briefly the authentic girl, underneath layers of imposed manipulation. "Grandpa, Mom and Dad say weird things about you when they think I am not listening," she whispered, clearly conscious of the need for discretion. "They talk about medicines and doctors and something called power of attorney. Are you really sick?" The genuine concern in her voice, combined with alarmingly specific information, crystallized complete understanding of the situation faced, not simple opportunistic manipulations, but a meticulously planned conspiracy to declare me incompetent, control family and corporate assets, and effectively eliminate me as an obstacle to the ambitions of the new generation. "I am not sick, sweetie," I replied carefully, conscious that any explanation too direct could traumatize her unnecessarily. "We just have adult disagreements about how to handle important matters. Can I help?" she asked with surprising determination for her age. "Actually, yes," I replied after careful consideration. "Do you remember how to write letters like Grandma Martha taught you?" Valerie nodded enthusiastically. Martha had initiated a tradition of written correspondence since an early age. Believing firmly in the value of tangible communication in the digital era, write a special letter, just for me, about anything that worries you or you have noticed recently. Keep it for the next time we see each other. It will be our special secret project. The opportunity to implement this secret project arrived unexpectedly 2 weeks later, when I managed a supervised visit during a Sunday afternoon. Valerie, initially reserved under Christine's watchful gaze, gradually relaxed when her mother finally attended an extensive phone call in another room. "I have it, Grandpa," she whispered, sliding it discreetly folded under a book we were reviewing together. "I wrote it like you said." The letter, written with careful third-grade handwriting, contains surprisingly specific observations about accidental parental conversations witnessed, mentions of a specialized clinic, mandatory treatment, and more alarming, concrete dates for implementation of the plan. Keep this in a very safe place. I instructed while placing the letter in an additional envelope along with other critical documents I had brought specifically for this purpose. And if you ever need to speak with me urgently, remember the special number we programmed in your tablet. I did not know then that would be our last genuine interaction before the incident that would change everything irrevocably. The incident that began with an apparently innocent phone call, where a voice that sounded like Valerie, but subsequently I would suspect was a manipulated recording, requested an urgent visit to show me an important school project. And so we arrive at the moment described at the beginning. Meticulously orchestrated ambush, culminating in my voluntary transfer to a private psychiatric clinic for a 72-hour evaluation, which according to documentation that they never showed me directly, I apparently had authorized previously during a moment of clarity. As the ambulance advanced through the streets of the city that fateful afternoon, I maintained an externally resigned expression, while internally calculating every phase of counterattack I would implement at the precisely correct moment. Counterattack developed during months of contingency planning, anticipating exactly this scenario, although hoping sincerely it would never be necessary. What Mark and Christine did not know then, comforted by the apparent success of their meticulously executed strategy, was that they had just made a fatal error, providing me with the perfect justification to implement the emergency protocol that would completely transform the balance of power, irrevocably and devastatingly. I had not anticipated they would use Valerie so directly, that they would turn her into an active participant, although manipulated, of their scheme. That emotional miscalculation on my part was painful, but also a necessary catalyst to finally accept the fundamental truth I had been avoiding facing completely. The family I thought I had, the continuity I had imagined building during decades, was fundamentally an illusion, based on expectations that contradicted reality, demonstrated by concrete actions. While the nurse completed admission documentation in the elegantly discreet clinic, I kept a contemplative silence that they would easily confuse with defeated resignation or sedated confusion. In reality, I was methodically reviewing every phase of the plan I was about to implement, a plan that would begin, ironically, with complete surrender and absolute cooperation, exactly the last thing they would expect from the man whose resistance they had anticipated and neutralized so carefully. The St. Angel Clinic, with its facade of an elegant colonial residence and meticulously manicured gardens, represented perfectly the discretion that wealthy families sought for their delicate situations. A place where uncomfortable problems could be kept conveniently apart from social and business circles, all under the appearance of specialized medical care of first category. My room, decorated with sobriety that tried to hide its true function, contained revealing characteristics that confirmed my suspicions. External locks, windows with limited opening, absence of potentially dangerous objects, and of course, surveillance cameras discreetly installed in strategic corners. "You will be comfortable here, Mr. Miller," the nurse explained while completing the admission procedure. "Dr. Nelson will perform a complete evaluation tomorrow after breakfast. Meanwhile, these tablets will help you rest." I observed the pills in a small plastic container, potent sedatives, according to my previous investigation, first phase of the standard protocol for agitated patients. Precisely what I needed to implement the first phase of my plan. "Thank you," I replied with docility that clearly reassured the staff. I placed the pills in my mouth, drank the offered water, and performed the swallowing movement I had practiced discreetly during years as part of international negotiations where refusing drinks could be considered offensive. The pills remained safe under my tongue until the nurse left, moment in which I deposited them carefully in the hidden pocket I had personally sewn inside my pajamas. If my calculations were correct, they would expect me to be deeply sedated during the next 8 hours, providing me a crucial window for first external communication. I waited patiently, feigning growing drowsiness for the benefit of surveillance cameras. Approximately 30 minutes later, they turned off the main lights, leaving only dim night lighting that allowed continuous monitoring. I lay down in a position that would seem natural for a sedated person, but that effectively blocked the partial view of cameras toward my hands. With measured and discreet movements, I extracted a device that looked like a simple analog watch, but that had been modified by a personal security specialist hired months ago precisely for this contingency. Pressing a specific sequence of side buttons, I activated the emergency protocol that would immediately alert 3 key people: my personal lawyer, Eric Vance, my head of corporate security, Raymond, and my executive assistant, Gabrielle. The message contained simply a preset code: Eagle condition implemented, 72 hours. This apparently cryptic phrase would activate a series of actions meticulously planned during previous months, based on scenarios I had visualized precisely because they seemed excessively paranoid, even for my closest confidants. Satisfied with the successful activation of the initial protocol, I genuinely adopted a resting position. I would need all my mental faculties to implement subsequent phases of the plan during the psychiatric evaluation scheduled for the next morning. Dr. Nelson turned out to be exactly the type of professional I expected to find in an establishment like St. Angel Clinic. Impressive credentials discreetly exhibited in his office, refined manners that projected unquestionable medical authority, and barely disguised ethical flexibility that manifested in evaluations conveniently aligned with the interests of those paying substantial fees. "Mr. Miller, I am here to help you." He began with a professionally compassionate tone while reviewing an apparently extensive file on my condition. "Your family is deeply concerned about recent changes in your behavior." I carefully observed the documentation he consulted, noticing an official letterhead from a reputed neurologist who supposedly had evaluated me previously, although such a consultation had never occurred. The forgery was professional, but recognizable for someone who, like me, had implemented document security measures in international corporate operations for decades. "I understand your concern, Doctor," I replied with a reasonable and collaborative tone, "and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify the situation." My response, measured and coherent instead of agitated or defensive, generated a brief flash of surprise, quickly suppressed. Clearly he had expected a confused or combative patient, not a calm and articulate interlocutor. During the next hour, I implemented the second phase of my strategy: absolute cooperation with evaluation while simultaneously mentally documenting every question, every insinuation, every predetermined conclusion that Nelson tried subtly to direct toward a convenient diagnosis for those who had orchestrated my commitment. I answered questions about temporal and spatial orientation with perfect precision. I performed standard cognitive tests with results that contradicted any suggestion of deterioration. I discussed family and business situations with clarity that obviously complicated the narrative he hoped to confirm. "Your answers are certainly interesting," he commented finally, clearly recalibrating his approach, "but behaviors reported by your family suggest intermittent episodes where your perception differs significantly from consensual reality. Could you specify exactly what behaviors have been reported?" I asked with genuine interest, craving additional documentation regarding specific fabrications they had built. The response was revealingly vague. References to unfounded accusations regarding financial manipulation and paranoid suspicions about non-consented medication, which conveniently and inaccurately reflected legitimate concerns I had expressed based on concrete evidence. "Dr. Nelson," I said finally, when his evaluation clearly reached predetermined conclusions regardless of evidence presented during the session, "I would like to formally request a second independent opinion and review of complete medical documentation provided for my admission." His immediate response was revealing in its defensiveness, barely contained. "That will not be necessary at this stage of initial evaluation. We must complete the full observational period before considering additional protocols." "I understand completely," I replied with apparent compliance that visibly reassured him. "Of course, I will continue cooperating fully with the established process." During the following 48 hours, I carefully maintained a strategic balance between model patient and meticulous observer. I took medication provided when absolutely necessary to maintain appearance of cooperation. After discreetly identifying pills using basic pharmacological knowledge acquired during preparatory investigation, I participated appropriately in scheduled activities and engaged in carefully calculated conversations with staff who potentially would provide relevant testimonies later. Meanwhile, outside those elegantly disguised walls, Eagle condition advanced precisely according to meticulous planning established months ago. My lawyer, Eric Vance, was filing urgent legal motions requesting independent review of involuntary commitment procedure simultaneously. Raymond was implementing security protocols designed specifically to document every interaction, every communication, every decision related to my treatment. More critical still, Gabrielle was quietly executing administrative and financial modifications I had authorized previously through legally incontestable documentation. Strategic transfers to alternative corporate structures, implementation of contingent protocols in key computer systems, and communications specifically timed with international contacts that would activate the next phase of the plan. The definitive confrontation occurred exactly 68 hours after my admission. Moments strategically selected to maximize legal and practical impact. Eric Vance, accompanied by an independent forensic doctor and a representative of the State Human Rights Commission, appeared at the reception of St. Angel Clinic with a court order requiring immediate evaluation of my condition and complete review of documentation related to commitment. The dismay of the administrative staff was immediate and revealing. Urgent calls to absent doctors, hurried consultations with legal advisors, barely disguised attempts to delay implementation of the court order. While urgently contacting Mark and Christine, I was located in the internal garden, where I maintained a deliberately casual conversation with 2 other patients and a supervising nurse, creating additional witnesses for my perfectly lucid and appropriate behavior. "Mr. Miller," announced the head nurse with barely contained tension, "you have visitors in the main conference room." My calm response visibly disconcerted the staff, who clearly anticipated resistance or confusion. "Thank you. I was waiting for them precisely now," Dr. Nelson, summoned urgently from an external engagement, attempted desperate control over the rapidly deteriorating situation. "This interruption is completely inappropriate during evaluation in progress. The patient requires a controlled environment without disruptive external influences. The controlled environment you mention has been implemented through legally questionable procedures that are currently under formal review," Eric replied with devastating precision while presenting additional documentation. "This court order specifically invalidates previous restrictions pending immediate independent evaluation. The subsequent evaluation, conducted by a genuinely independent neuropsychiatrist, concluded predictably that I did not present indicators of significant cognitive deterioration nor psychiatric conditions that justified involuntary treatment, approximately 90 minutes after Eric's arrival. I was leaving the facilities of St. Angel Clinic, legally free but fully aware that the real battle was just beginning. Mark and Christine, notified about unexpected developments, would undoubtedly implement desperate countermeasures to safeguard the plan that was visibly crumbling. "Did you implement the full protocol?" I asked Eric while we headed toward a predetermined secure location instead of my usual residence. "Fully activated," he confirmed with professional satisfaction. "Phase 3 starts in approximately 4 hours, coinciding with the opening of international markets. Phase 4, prepared for immediate implementation according to final instructions. Perfect," I replied while visualizing mentally the sequence of carefully orchestrated events that were about to irrevocably transform the business and family reality built during decades. It is time for a final message to Valerie, my granddaughter, the only genuinely innocent victim in this manufactured tragedy. Deserved an explanation appropriately adapted before imminent news about complete restructuring of Miller Industrial Group inevitably reached even childish circles. The message, sent through a secure channel established months ago, was simple but essential. Grandpa is perfectly fine. Soon you will understand important changes that will occur. Remember always that I love you unconditionally, regardless of external circumstances. While the armored car advanced toward a discreet residential complex where I would implement final phases of my counterattack, I experienced extraordinary emotional clarity that had eluded me during months of gradual manipulation. Clarity crystallized, perfectly in a simple but profound thought. True family is defined through consistent actions, not simply biological ties or traditional expectations. Mark and Christine had deliberately chosen a path that prioritized material acquisition over fundamental integrity, control over authentic respect, manipulation over genuine connection. Their decisions would have proportionate consequences that would completely transform their reality, just as they had attempted to transform mine. Begin Phase 3. I indicated to Gabrielle by secure communication while observing the urban skyline from the window of a temporarily secure apartment. It is time for complete reconstruction. Phase 3. Denominated internally irreversible restructuring, activated precisely at 8 a.m. When international financial markets opened operations. What occurred during the next 12 hours was the result of preparations meticulously implemented silently during previous months. First, simultaneous blocks activated on all main corporate accounts of Miller Industrial Group, requiring double authorizations that effectively paralyzed Mark and Christine's ability to make significant transfers. Second, official communiqué distributed to minority shareholders, strategic business partners, and relevant regulatory authorities, announcing exhaustive administrative review due to irregularities identified during routine audit. Finally, formal notification sent to the Board of Directors convening an extraordinary session with a single agenda item, evaluation of continuity in executive leadership. I observed from a strategic distance while corporate infrastructure built during 4 decades experienced controlled but fundamental transformation. Key executives, previously informed discreetly about the real situation, implemented contingent protocols designed specifically for this eventuality, critical computer systems, temporarily isolated to prevent unauthorized modifications, operated under direct supervision of absolutely trustworthy technical specialists. Mark has attempted emergency access 3 times during the last hour, reported Gabrielle, approximately at noon. Christine is currently in corporate legal offices demanding explanations about implemented blocks. Her desperation was understandable but completely ineffective. Every contingency had been anticipated, every potential vulnerable point identified and reinforced, every administrative or financial escape route meticulously blocked. The extraordinary meeting of the Board of Directors, scheduled strategically for 4 p.m., would represent the critical moment where formal corporate control would be clarified definitively. My physical presence, after supposed cognitive deterioration so carefully fabricated by Mark and Christine, would generate significant psychological impact beyond immediate legal implications. While I prepared for this decisive encounter, I received an unexpected but not completely surprising call. Mark, finally understanding the magnitude of the counterattack implemented, trying desperately to negotiate before full consequences manifested irrevocably. Dad, a terrible misunderstanding has occurred, he began, voice trembling, barely disguising underlying panic. The concerns about your health were genuine, although perhaps implemented incorrectly. We can resolve this as a family, without need for such drastic corporate actions. Interesting reinterpretation of deliberate attempt to declare me incapacitated while systematically manipulating business structures. I replied with calm that visibly destabilized his prepared narrative. But certainly, we can discuss appropriate resolution during the imminent board meeting. His tone changed instantly, abandoning pretense of filial concern for a more directly transactional approach. What exactly do you want? We can negotiate share participation, executive positions, any reasonable restructuring without need for public confrontation that would harm corporate value for everyone involved. What do I want? I replied with clarity that reflected unwavering resolution. It is complete implementation of proportional consequences for actions deliberately executed, exactly as you taught Valerie should occur through the manipulation you orchestrated. Momentary silence, followed by a barely veiled threat. Remember that any extreme action will also affect Valerie. Her well-being depends on family stability that you are actively destroying. This invocation of my granddaughter as an emotional human shield crystallized perfectly the moral depravity that founded his entire strategy. The response I provided would establish the definitive tone for complete resolution. Your sudden concern for Valerie's well-being is touching, considering you deliberately used her as an instrument in a conspiracy to institutionalize me. Fortunately, her future is specifically protected through fiduciary structures, completely independent of imminent corporate decisions. I suggest adequate preparation for the meeting scheduled for 4 p.m., where remaining options will be clarified in detail. The meeting itself passed with surprising efficiency, considering the extraordinary nature of circumstances. My entry into the boardroom generated an immediate reaction. Board members genuinely surprised by the appearance of the founding president supposedly hospitalized for severe psychiatric condition. Mark's expression fluctuated visibly between disbelief and desperate calculation. Notable absence of Christine, apparently incapable of facing direct confrontation she had helped so significantly to create. Subsequent presentation, conducted professionally by Eric Vance and an independent financial forensic team, meticulously documented the complete narrative: gradual manipulation of corporate structures, systematic falsification of medical evaluations, and finally, coordinated attempt of declaration of incapacity through involuntary commitment based completely on fabricated diagnoses, considering evidence presented and independent verification of relevant documentation. Formally concluded the director of the board, after brief but intense deliberation. This body unanimously approves proposed resolution: immediate restitution of Mr. Richard Miller as executive president with full authority, provisional suspension of all personnel involved in documented actions, pending complete investigation and activation of contingent protocols established to guarantee operational continuity during transitional period. Mark, completely disarmed by exhaustive revelation of meticulously documented conspiracy, weakly attempted final argumentation. These extreme actions will destroy corporate value built during decades. There are less drastic alternatives that could be implemented while we maintain appearance of family continuity. The appearance, I replied with resonant clarity. That immediately silenced the entire room. Is precisely the fundamental problem we face. We sacrifice essential integrity for convenient facades, fundamental values for superficially impressive structures. That era ends definitively today. The subsequent formal vote was anticlimactic. Unanimous approval of complete restructuring, including immediate removal of Mark and Christine from all executive positions, preventive freezing of potentially compromised shareholdings, and authorization for exhaustive legal review with possible criminal implications, depending on specific findings. While the council dispersed after historic decisions implemented during extraordinary session, Mark made a final approach. Disconcerting combination of threat and plea. You do not understand the full consequences of the path you have chosen. There are aspects of the situation that remain completely unknown to you. We can still find a resolution that preserves some of the family legacy that Martha valued so deeply. The invocation of Martha, the woman whose ethical vision he had betrayed so fundamentally, crystallized the final resolution I had been contemplating during preparation for this decisive moment. The true legacy, I replied while gathering documents in front of me, does not consist of corporate structures or superficial biological continuity, but in fundamental values consistently demonstrated through concrete actions. You have repeatedly chosen a path diametrically opposite to principles we tried to instill in you during your entire life. Proportional consequences simply reflect clarity about decisions you implemented deliberately. What will happen now? He asked, finally. Abandoning pretensions of situational control while making reluctant recognition of fundamental transformation implemented during previous 12 hours. My response established definitive parameters for future relationship irrevocably modified. Corporate investigation will continue according to established protocols. Personally, I will implement complete restructuring of Miller Industrial Group, followed immediately by a decision I have contemplated silently for months. Complete sale of majority participation to an international consortium that has expressed consistent interest during previous years. The shock in his expression reflected sudden understanding of full implication. Not simply temporary loss of operational control, but definitive elimination of material foundation that had motivated the complete conspiracy. You cannot simply sell the entire family legacy. He protested with genuine disbelief. It is wealth built during decades for generational continuity. Wealth built through fundamental integrity that you tried to systematically subvert, I corrected calmly. Company that valued authentic connections over convenient manipulations. Exactly the contradiction of values you have demonstrated consistently. Sale represents simply final recognition of reality you have established through deliberate actions, fundamental discontinuity between original vision and current manifestation. While I left the boardroom, leaving Mark contemplating ruins of an empire he had tried to acquire through methods so fundamentally contrary to principles on which it was originally built, I experienced extraordinary emotional clarity, genuine pain for loss of family continuity imagined during decades, combined paradoxically with profound liberation from expectations that contradicted reality demonstrated repeatedly. Phase 4, implemented during subsequent weeks, would represent more personal transformation, complete reconstruction, not simply of corporate structures, but of fundamental identity. After 61 years defined primarily through business and family roles that had been irrevocably modified through experience betrayal and proportional response implemented, that night, while I contemplated the urban skyline from the window of temporarily secure residence, I drafted final message for the most innocent person affected by relational devastation experienced. Valerie, child manipulated to participate in conspiracy whose full implications she could not possibly understand at her 9 years. Dear Valerie, significant events will occur during coming days that will transform family circumstances you have known, regardless of narratives you will potentially hear. I want you to remember fundamental truth. My love for you remains absolutely unconditional and completely separate from adult conflicts that have occurred. I have established a completely independent educational trust that will guarantee future opportunities regardless of external circumstances. When you are older, I sincerely hope for opportunity to share more complete perspectives on situations that currently exceed appropriate understanding for your age, with unwavering love. Your Grandpa Richard. While meticulously designed financial system transferred automatically significant funds toward fiduciary structure, inaccessible for Mark or Christine, but eventually available completely for Valerie upon reaching legal maturity, I contemplated the fundamental paradox that defined the whole situation. Authentic love manifested through strategic separation that potentially would preserve future genuine connection currently impossible within family structure, irremediably contaminated by manipulation and systematic deceit. The sale of Miller Industrial Group finalized approximately 2 months later through intensive but efficient negotiations represented simultaneously conclusion of vital chapter and beginning of completely unexpected possibilities. The European Acquiring Consortium, recognizing fundamental value of operations established during decades, implemented transition that preserved critical jobs while simultaneously eliminating completely remaining influence of original founding family. My subsequent disappearance from previously defining business and social circles was meticulously planned but implemented with discretion that generated extensive but fundamentally incorrect speculations. Rumors about retirement in Europe, relocation to South America, even conspiracy theories about international corporate manipulations circulated briefly before new social scandal captured collective transitory attention characteristic of metropolitan elites. Reality, as frequently occurs, was simultaneously more mundane and more extraordinary than speculations generated. I simply moved approximately 400 miles toward a location considerably less prominent but infinitely more authentic, where I would implement complete personal reconstruction based on fundamental values temporarily obscured during decades of corporate expansion and traditional family expectations. I had lost biological family built during decades, but unexpectedly would discover potentially more authentic connections during vital chapter completely unforeseen that barely began to unfold. Charleston, with its perfectly preserved colonial architecture and vital rhythm radically different from the perpetual frenzy of Chicago, represented precisely the new beginning I needed, the house I acquired. Located in a traditional neighborhood within walking distance of the historic center, combined classic architectural elements with discrete modernizations that provided comfort without unnecessary ostentation. The first months of this new life passed in fundamental recalibration of priorities and habits developed during decades of intense corporate leadership. After 61 years defined primarily through business responsibilities and traditional family expectations, I experienced extraordinary freedom to rediscover personal aspects long subordinated to predetermined social roles. I began to explore previously postponed interests. Local history that had always fascinated Martha. Architectural photography that I had abandoned decades ago for lack of productive time. Even classes of traditional Southern cooking. Activity I would have considered completely incompatible with executive image carefully maintained during previous professional life. Simultaneously, I maintained discreet but consistent vigilance over circumstances of only genuinely innocent person in manufactured family tragedy. Valeria. Private investigators provided periodic updates on her well-being, confirming that educational trust remained intact and functioning according to established parameters, completely inaccessible for Mark and Christine. Reports indicated that Mark, confronting radically transformed economic reality after corporate sale that eliminated material foundation for lifestyle previously maintained, had eventually accepted mid-level executive position in international conglomerate significantly smaller than Miller Industrial Group. Christine, predictably, had ended the marriage approximately 6 months after financial collapse that eliminated material benefits originally anticipated through connection. Valerie, now under primarily paternal custody with structured maternal visits, apparently showed notable adaptation considering fundamental transformations experienced in immediate family environment. Her school grades remained consistently excellent. Participation in extracurricular activities indicated healthy social development, and occasionally, according to reliable sources within educational institution, mentioned spontaneously Grandpa who lives far away but still loves me. Encouraging suggestion that final message transmitted had resisted potential alternative narratives implemented by Mark or Christine. This confirmation, although provided significant satisfaction and validation of decisions implemented, simultaneously intensified occasional sensation of existential void that inevitably accompanied voluntary but painful separation from only direct descendant. Conscious recognition of strategic need for temporary distancing did not eliminate completely emotional impact of experienced generational discontinuity. It was during this period of personal adaptation and philosophical reconsideration, when an apparently casual encounter occurred, that would fundamentally transform subsequent vital trajectory. The Regional Museum of History offered a specialized lecture on colonial architectural techniques. As a regular participant in institutional cultural programming, I occupied habitual seat when I noticed a woman approximately contemporary taking adjacent place. We exchanged polite but professional greetings while we waited for start of presentation. "Excuse me," she commented discreetly while lecturer organized preliminary materials. "Did we not meet previously at the exhibition on ceremonial pottery last month? I believe I remember a particularly interesting conversation about chromatic symbolism in ritual pieces." Her observation was technically incorrect, but revealed shared interest in themes I had been exploring systematically since relocation to Charleston. After friendly clarification about identity confusion, we initiated substantive conversation about historical themes that continued naturally during refreshment following formal lecture. Helen, as I would learn gradually during subsequent cultural encounters, represented paradoxically a connection with a completely different world and simultaneously reflected vital experiences surprisingly parallel. Widow for approximately 15 years. She had transitioned from apparently ideal marriage with respected university professor toward devastating postmortem discovery about systematic extramarital relationships and previously unknown children resulting. Discovering that fundamental reality contradicted completely narrative maintained during decades was simultaneously devastating and strangely liberating. She shared during dinner that followed third shared lecture. It allowed finally recognition of inconsistencies previously ignored and complete reconsideration of vital priorities she had subordinated to externally imposed expectations. Her precise articulation of emotional experience that resonated so deeply with my own recent trajectory catalyzed authentic connection rarely experienced, especially considering current vital circumstances. Subsequent conversations revealed surprising additional compatibilities. Shared appreciation for historic architecture, complementary philosophical perspectives on relational authenticity, even notably similar culinary preferences. Gradually, cultural encounters evolved into shared meals. Joint architectural explorations, and eventually genuine emotional connection that neither had anticipated developing at our respective mature ages. Life has an extraordinary sense of humor. Helen commented approximately 6 months after initial encounter while we shared a sunset from a restored colonial terrace. Precisely when we conclude that certain experiences belong exclusively to previous vital chapters, unexpected circumstances demonstrate fundamental limitations of our most basic presumptions. Her observation captured perfectly the extraordinary paradox that defined this completely unforeseen vital phase. Authentic connection developed precisely when conventional expectations suggested fundamental impossibility for such experiences. Relationship that did not attempt to replace previous significant stories, but fully recognized accumulated complexities, while simultaneously allowing genuinely new possibilities. Approximately a year after initial relocation to Charleston, I received unexpected but not completely surprising communication. Handwritten letter from Mark, carefully drafted and obviously considered extensively before effective sending. Content reflected partial but significant reconsideration of previous perspectives and actions. After extensive reflection on events that fundamentally transformed family circumstances, I recognize significant personal responsibility for experienced relational deterioration, although justifications seemed valid during implementation of actions now evidently destructive. I currently understand devastating impact of decisions based primarily on transitory material considerations over potential permanent fundamental connections. I do not request immediate reconciliation nor restoration of previous circumstances, simply potential communication that could eventually facilitate limited but significant reconnection. Particularly considering impact on Valerie, who occasionally expresses explicit desire for contact with Grandpa, she remembers positively despite contradictory narratives experienced. The communication notable for absence of evident manipulation that had characterized previous interactions presented genuine dilemma. Appropriate balance between justified personal protection against potential additional disappointments versus authentic possibility for partial but potentially significant generational reconnection, particularly considering impact on Valerie. After careful consideration and extensive consultation with Helen, whose perspective balanced genuine compassion with pragmatism based on comparable personal experience, I decided measured response. Establishment of limited but structured communication specifically designed to allow interaction with Valerie while maintaining appropriate limits with Mark. Approximately 3 months later, I briefly met Valerie during carefully organized visit in neutral location. Her immediate reaction: spontaneously hugging the grandpa who disappeared but still loves me, provided extraordinary validation for decisions implemented during family crisis previously experienced. Today, 5 years after family betrayal that catalyzed completely unexpected vital transformation, I maintain balanced existence between completely reconstructed life shared with Helen in Charleston and carefully structured but genuinely significant connection with Valerie, who visits regularly during specific vacation periods. Mark, demonstrating limited but genuine personal evolution, maintains civil relationships strictly defined by clearly established parameters. Communication remains focused exclusively on circumstances relevant for Valerie's well-being without illusory expectations about complete restoration of trust fundamentally compromised through historical actions. Get lost. Those cruel words spoken by Valerie manipulated during meticulously orchestrated family ambush represented simultaneously most devastating point of betrayal, experienced an unexpected catalyst for vital transformation I would never have visualized voluntarily. While I observed Charleston's sunset from terrace shared with Helen, who gradually evolved from casual acquaintance toward deeply valued vital companion, I contemplate fundamental paradox that defines experienced vital trajectory. Precisely when apparently catastrophic circumstances completely destroyed foundations previously considered absolutely essential. Resulting space allowed development of authenticity previously inaccessible within conventionally successful but fundamentally limiting family and professional structures. The most painful family betrayal imaginable unexpectedly catalyzed extraordinary liberation toward completely unforeseen vital possibilities, demonstrating fundamental truth frequently recognized intellectually but rarely experienced viscerally. Apparently devastating transformations occasionally represent precisely necessary recalibrations for personal authenticity, previously subordinated to externally imposed expectations. Looking retrospectively at extraordinary journey from get lost to complete reconstruction implemented, I finally understand observation Martha frequently shared during particularly challenging moments. Life rarely provides exactly anticipated experiences, but consistently offers precisely necessary lessons for authentic evolution, frequently disguised as apparently insurmountable crises. Yes,